excited about all the connections that he could make, and he'd written a numbered list of the celebrities, and that list included Hillary Clinton, Orlando Bloom, Kate Hudson, and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right, and they asked Singh to kind of go down the list and say to the jury who everyone was, and some of them were fairly big names and somewhat self-explanatory, but he gets to Kendall and Kris Jenner, and he says, quote, "I honestly could not tell you what they do." And everyone kind of started laughing.
Yeah, but how many people in the courtroom do you think know who Kendall and Kris Jenner are? I mean, how would you define them?
I thought they were influencers, but that's probably not a correct definition.
I would say the correct terminology, for the record, is that they are part of a family known as the Kardashians. But that's not important to this trial. In general, these weren't the only concerns Singh said he had. He also had to face much bigger problems at the court of FTX, and we'll talk about that after the break.
This episode is brought to you by the Everyday Wealth Podcast. They say nothing's more expensive than a missed opportunity, especially when it comes to everyday personal finances. But how do you identify opportunities to make your money work as hard as you do? By tuning into Edelman Financial Engine's Everyday Wealth, a podcast created to help you make smarter money choices, hosted by Gene Tatsky. Everyday Wealth, available wherever you get your podcasts.
So if you remember, last week in court, Caroline Ellison testified that Bankman-Fried directed her to alter Alameda's balance sheets to conceal the true extent of its debt. And today, Nishad Singh testified that there were also a few ways Bankman-Fried asked him to do some similar things, didn't he?
Right, so Singh said that Bankman-Fried asked him to alter documents that were meant for the U.S. commodities regulator.
Doesn't sound very glamorous, but actually very important.
But it is one of like the big organizations that regulate U.S. financial markets, and so like that actually is a big deal. But Singh said that in that instance, he actually refused to alter those documents.
But there was an instance where Singh testified that he did agree to doctor some documents.
Right, and that was at the end of 2021. Singh said that Bankman-Fried asked him to make a couple of changes, change the dates on some information that made it look like FTX had a bit more revenue than it actually did. Singh said that they were kind of on the cusp of having $1 billion in revenue for 2021, and Bankman-Fried asked him to change some information to kind of just barely put them over that line. And Singh said that that information was later presented to auditors and investors.
I should say that there was, when this was presented in court, I heard you just go, "Oh my God," next to me.
I thought that was fairly big.
It was big. And before this trial started, one thing we understood about Singh was that he was a major Democratic donor. And today he testified that actually he says he was the face of a group of people who directed these political donations. Singh said that some of the money was his and some belonged to FTX customers, and those donations went to various left-of-centre causes. We should say Singh has pleaded guilty to conspiracy to violate campaign finance laws, and Bankman-Fried was initially charged with the same, and he pleaded not guilty.
Right, and those are no longer part of the charges against him at this moment. But Singh testified that he was becoming increasingly unhappy with how his name was being used for these donations, and it felt like the prosecution was kind of trying to show the ethos of the companies that Bankman-Fried founded, that he was kind of this leader who expected high loyalty and financial commitment from the people who were very close to him.
Nishad Singh also testified that he found out later than other members of the inner circle about the huge amount of money Alameda owed to FTX. He described today finding that out in September 2022, and he says he decided to confront Bankman-Fried on the balcony of their penthouse in the Bahamas, where they lived with others.
actually, the government pulled up a photo of the balcony. It has a huge, massive swimming pool in the middle of it. There's like these sprawling chairs out to either side. Singh said that he felt betrayed. He thought that FTX was this force for good, that it would use the money it made to improve the world. And at this meeting, Singh said that he asked Bankman-Fried how much money Alameda owed to FTX, how much was this so-called whole. Singh said that Bankman-Fried responded that Singh was asking the wrong question, that he should be asking, how much money could they pull together within 24 hours? And Bankman-Fried said that, that was $5 billion. And that sounds like a lot, but Alameda actually owed FTX $13 billion at the time. And Singh said that his response to this was, quote, Jesus effing Christ.
That anxiety that Nishad Singh described on the witness stand today, he said it only amplified over the next few months. And when the collapse of FTX eventually happened in November 2022, he actually described being suicidal for some days.
And we've previously reported that Singh was a wreck in the days after FTX collapsed. People close to him said that he was really upset, distraught, unshaven, kind of gaunt. And he just kind of disappeared with his girlfriend, who was also a senior FTX employee, and he was just unreachable. Singh's former colleagues at the time expressed disbelief that he got caught up in the alleged misuse of customer funds, and they kind of found it hard to reconcile, his really sincere devotion to doing good for the world with what FTX had allegedly become.
The prosecution has now finished questioning Singh. What do you think the defense will be looking to do during the cross on Tuesday?
Yeah, the defense needs to show that Bankman-Fried wasn't orchestrating all of this, that, there was no intent on the part of Bankman-Fried, as we've kind of been saying all along. But one of the other hurdles for the defense has proven to be Bankman-Fried's access to his ADHD medication.
Yes, and the defense has sent a letter to Judge Kaplan about Bankman-Fried's medication schedule, saying he isn't getting the Adderall he needs to concentrate during his trial. And in that letter, we actually got our first hint from the defense that Bankman-Fried may in fact take the stand in his own defense. They're saying that the Adderall he uses for his ADHD would be critical to the decision for him to testify, didn't they?
Yeah, and this was a big debate at the end of today. This was after the jury had been sent out and the government and defense lawyers were just kind of talking to Judge Kaplan. Bankman-Fried's attorneys had wanted a short adjournment to try and change the medication type that Bankman-Fried was given, the type of pill. But the judge was very clear that he is not a physician, he cannot prescribe drugs, and he said that he hasn't personally observed a problem with Bankman-Fried in court.
So definitely more to come on that. That's all for today, Tuesday, October 17th.
The Trial of Crypto's Golden Boy is part of The Journal, which is a co-production of Spotify and The Wall Street Journal. I'm Caitlin Ostroff.
And I'm Rachel Humphreys. This episode was produced by Enrique Perez de la Rosa, and it was edited by Catherine Whalen. Additional reporting in this episode by James Finelli, Corinne Ramey, and Alex Osipovich.
Our engineer is Peter Leonard. Our theme music is by So Wiley and remixed by Peter Leonard. Additional music in this episode by Peter Leonard.
Thanks for listening. Check back here for trial updates.
This episode is brought to you by Viator. Experiences are what people love the most about travel. With thousands of bookable experiences, Viator has something for everyone, from simple tours to extreme adventures. And with millions of traveler reviews, you'll have all the information to book the best activities. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. one app, over 300,000 travel experiences you'll remember. Do more with Viator. This message is brought to you by Nuveen. Nuveen has provided investment excellence for 125 years, with expertise across income and alternatives. Nuveen continues to expand its capabilities while maintaining its legacy as a leading investment manager. Visit Nuveen.com to learn more. Investing involves risk. Loss of principal is possible.
Here's your money briefing for Tuesday, October 17th. I'm J.R. Whalen for the Wall Street Journal. Ask people what bothers them the most about their job, and many are likely to say the amount of time they spend in meetings. 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there. It adds up to a lot of time away from their desks. But some are trying to solve that by cutting meeting times in half.
If you take away the hemming and the hawing and the warm-up, 15 minutes is really enough time to get most of what you want to get done in a meeting done.
We'll talk to Wall Street Journal reporter Anne-Marie Chaker about the art of the 15-minute meeting after the break.
This message is brought to you by Nuveen. Nuveen has provided investment excellence for 125 years. A lot has changed, but one thing that remains constant, including the different types of durable income and portfolios, can help investors meet their goals. With expertise across income and alternatives, Nuveen continues to expand its capabilities while maintaining its legacy as a leading investment manager. Visit Nuveen.com to learn more. Investing involves risk. Loss of principal is possible.
Is 15 the new 30? Bosses and workers feel they can be more productive by reducing typical half-hour meetings to 15 minutes. Wall Street Journal reporter Anne-Marie Chaker joins me. So Anne-Marie, a lot of people feel that meetings slow down productivity, but they've been a mainstay of the workplace seemingly forever. Why the push to reduce meetings to 15 minutes?
We're all tied to our calendars more acutely than ever before, with video conferencing calls tied to our calendaring systems online. We feel it very acutely when we're 1 minute over or under. So, there's just more of an awareness that time is money, and the normal default when we calendar something tends to be 30 minutes. And that can feel like too much.
But is 15 minutes enough time to get things done?
If you really look long and hard at your blocks of time, you feel if you're focused, that most, maybe not all, but most of what you can get done in a meeting can get done in 15. If you take away the hemming and the hawing and the warm-up, 15 minutes is really enough time to get most of what you want to get done in a meeting done.
So the pleasantries, what you have for dinner last night, that all can go away.
Yeah, it's not to say that you can't do a little bit of it, but we tend to get nervous and do too much of it, and then the other person feels they need to respond to it, and then it just ends up taking half the meeting. If you can just bring in a little bit of confidence, a little bit of warm-up, but then just say something like, let's get straight to it because we only have 15 minutes.
But is there a learning curve for people to be able to make their points or make a presentation in a short amount of time, like 15 minutes in a work meeting?
There are a few things you can do to get people more on board. You can give them a heads up. Hey, I want to hear all about your weekend. You can use your voice for warmth. We discount how the voice is really a powerful way to convey warmth, and we shouldn't be afraid to use it to our advantage. And just to say something that kind of is personal but also moves it along, like, I want to hear all about your weekend, but let's get right to it because we only have 15 minutes. I've actually fixed my calendaring to blocks of 15 after this story from blocks of 30 before, and I feel it's been very effective in kind of setting things up better.
But if 15 minutes means that somebody might have less time to do their actual work in a meeting as opposed to a longer meeting, would that be a learning curve for them to economize how they're going to present to their group of coworkers?
When we're nervous, we hem and haw, we overthink, and then when something is scheduled for 30, people on the other end feel like they're going to need to take up all that time. So there's just a lot of time wasted anyway. One way I like to do these is to stack them a bit. The worst for me is when I have like blocks of 15 minutes between meetings, because I feel like I can't get enough done anyway to really focus, and I'm only just getting started on a project or writing or whatever. So if you can stack them or schedule them in a way that makes sense to you, maybe 3 15-minute meetings back to back and just like a 5-minute drink of water or breather in between those, it can be very effective.
So when you have 15-minute meetings on the calendar, how should people plan those meetings?
One thing that I've heard people do is offer a few bullets ahead of time. Here's what we're going to talk about, and here's some reading material, so that people come to the conversation more prepared. I even talked to one boss who said that it sounds that a lot of people don't read the reading material anyway, so they just take the first 5 minutes of the meeting to speed read. There's all kinds of ways you can do it, but just presenting up front that this is a meeting that's going to be focused on this, that, and the other, and we only have 15 minutes and let's get right to it, I think really changes the whole tenor of the thing.
So will the 15-minute meeting plan solve the too many meetings problem that many people have in the office?
Anything that helps people focus is a good thing, and maybe because the meetings are tighter, then we just have more time to do actual work. And focus work is very important and something that a lot of people are talking about right now, and having more meetings reduces the amount of time we actually can sit and think and write, which is very valuable. So yes, it could be a really good solution and something that more people can look towards. It's really effective. If you look at your calendar settings, just take a look at what the default setting is, and it's easy to change that and to give it a try for a week and see if it works.
That's Wall Street Journal reporter Anne-Marie Shaker. And that's it for your Money Briefing. We'll be back tomorrow morning to discuss how more businesses are offering discounts to customers who pay in cash with WSJ's Amani Moise. This episode was produced by me, J.R. Whalen, with supervising producer Melanie Roy. Thanks for listening.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Trimble, connecting industries with the data and insights they need to thrive in a new, interconnected world of work. Visit Trimble.com, transforming the way the world works in construction, transportation, and agriculture.
You're listening to Shortwave from NPR.
Hey Shortwavers, Regina Barber here.
And I'm science correspondent Jeff Brumfield.
And today, Jeff, you're back with us to talk about artificial intelligence, which is all over the news.
Future of journalism in a time of artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence remains a key issue for Hollywood actors on
Bring artificial intelligence into our daily routine.
But out in the real world, not so much. I mean, I think there's AI being used in my Google searches, maybe helping me with my playlist, but I'm not really using it at work.
Yeah, I mean, I've played around with it for fun, but for the most part, that's been about it. But recently,
very much so. I mean, I talk about at one point, I interviewed the dishwasher, and also at restaurants of a certain formality, there is someone who, after the dishes have been washed and dried, kind of rubs out any little streaks and stains. And I interviewed both of them. They're both immigrants to the United States. And I don't think people give any thought to dishwashers, but a lot of these people will tell you if the dish pit falls behind, the entire restaurant can crash. You know, we've all seen these old movies where people don't have money to pay for dinner and they have to wash dishes at the end of the night, but that's not a reality. Dishes actually get washed throughout a dinner service and reused maybe 3-4 times. It's something I think most civilians don't even realize.
That slice of this kind of goes along with our separation from the sources of our food. And the reason I ask is that there's a scene or a story in this book where you're alongside a chef, and the chef asks the butcher what he wants to get rid of, and she then takes his discards basically and turns this waste product, as it were, into actual food.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's a great story. It's Slagle Family Farms, which is the meat purveyor in the book. And this chef now is very well known. Her name is Stephanie Izzard. She was a Top Chef winner several years ago. And she called up Louis John one day and said, what do you need to get rid of? And he said, well, we have a lot of yield from pig heads that I don't think...
Say that again in case it went by people. Pig heads.
We have a lot of yield from pig heads that doesn't get used. And, I don't know what most people think when they hear that, but, there's a lot of preparations in classic French cooking. You wouldn't know it was pig head, but she then created a dish called wood roasted pig face, which is a signature dish. And yes, that all came about from a chef calling a farmer and saying, what do you need to get rid of, which, that's low-hanging fruit, right? That's profit that was just sitting there to be pulled in.
Let me get you back to where you started, the fact that you have been doing this for a good long while now. What did you learn in writing this book?
Well, number one, I've never worked in a kitchen professionally. I was a busboy when I was 15, but I came to this as a writer, and I could not tell you what happens when a chit, which is the little piece of thermal paper that is kicked out of the point of sale machine that a server will hand to the kitchen. I couldn't tell you how things got from that through the courses of a meal to the check being presented, or how exactly the timing worked. And I couldn't have listed how many employees there are at a meat packing facility, and the same thing at the farm. When I got there at 2:30 in the morning, there were maybe 30, 35 people. Some were packing up to take a truck to a farmer's market. Others were going out on their restaurant delivery runs. And, even I don't think really knew how many people we're talking about.
How was the dish? You tasted it at the end, right?
Oh yeah. No, I tasted it on day one. The only night I wasn't in the kitchen from start to finish was the one night I came in and had dinner as a guest, and that's when I had the dish. I had it in the context of a full meal. It was delicious.
The latest book by Andrew Friedman is called The Dish, The Lives and Labor Behind One Plate of Food. Andrew, thanks a lot. I enjoyed the book.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Swiping through pictures until I landed on his photo.
But first, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 13 points today, less than a 10%, 33,997. The Nasdaq dropped 34 points, about a 0.25%, 13,533. S&P 500 flat, 43 and 73 there. Justin Host is telling us about monthly retail sales. So let's see how some big box stores fared in the markets today, shall we? Walmart picked up about a 10%. Target increased 1%. Costco bumped up 0.4%. Today Lowe's down about a 10%. Johnson & Johnson announced it's going to restructure the part of the company that deals in medical devices, think orthopedics. That's after third quarter profits in medical device sales fell short. Johnson & Johnson's shares dipped 0.9%. General Motors announced it's slowing its roll on all-electric trucks. The company plans to start producing its next-generation EV pickups in 2025 instead of next year to, quote, better manage capital investment. GM revved up 0.9% today. Bonds fell, as I said, the yield on the 10-year T-note, 4.83%. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Marketplace Numbers segment is supported by Odoo, simple management software for all your business needs. Marketplace is supported by C3 AI. C3 Generative AI provides ChatGPT enterprise search that is verifiable, secure, and accurate across all enterprise data. Learn more at c3.ai. This is Enterprise AI. And by Bitwarden. With cybersecurity a top priority for business, the Bitwarden Password Manager offers multiple authentication options for single sign-on for enterprises. Learn more at bitwarden.com. And by Fidelity. A dedicated Fidelity advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. More at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. support comes from I1 Unique Eyewear, a local independent optical shop with classic styles in tortoise to distinctive shapes in a kaleidoscope of colors, celebrating over 20 years on Hyde Park Square. Also in Dayton at the shops of Oakwood. I-1.com. I1 Unique Eyewear. Discover great art.
Local support for Marketplace comes from Sharonville Convention Center, focused on creating exceptional event experiences. New for 2023 will be the Tide Cartoon Exhibit Hall with a capacity of up to 2,000 for dinner and 40,000 square feet of exhibit space. The Sharonville Convention Center is dedicated to making your events even better. More information at SharonvilleConventionCenter.com.
Marketplace is proudly sponsored by Total Wealth Planning, a 30-year Cincinnati-based wealth advisory firm serving executives and emerging leaders through financial guidance. TWPteam.com.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Rizdal. The number of Americans working from home is down from 2021. That's according to data from the Census Bureau. Still, and although 26% of households have somebody working from home at least one day a week. Bloomberg drilled down into that data this week, though, and discovered some interesting state-by-state differences, and not even states that are all that far apart either. Colorado and Wyoming have the highest and the lowest shares of remote workers in the country. Marketplace's Elizabeth Schroebel has today's tale of two labor economies.
In Wyoming, just 13% of households have a remote worker. Nick Kalsh, an economist with Laramie County Community College, has been back in the classroom for a couple of years.
Oh, I'm sitting in my office right now.
He says the state's outsized labor force and energy is one reason so few workers can work from home.
Wyoming produces 40% of U.S. coal. I think people kind of think West Virginia, and they should be thinking Wyoming.
Which, as Joe Craig with University of Colorado, Colorado Springs points out,
these are things you can't do remote until the computers take over and have cycles drive the machines.
And Wyoming's economy is among the least diversified in the country, says Wanling Liu, a state economist, with few jobs in professional and educational services.
Wyoming is completely disproportionate at the bottom.
In Colorado, where 38% of households have a remote worker, the state has lots of highly educated professional and technical workers. Some even brought their jobs to Colorado when they moved from coastal cities during the pandemic, says Eric Olson with talent firm Robert Half.
And so many of those companies were very flexible, allowing someone to move to Colorado, stay with the firm, keep their job.
Economist Tatiana Bailey with Data-Driven Economic Strategies says there's also some self-selection going on. Colorado's year-round sun and mountains attract workers who prioritize flexibility.
They like to be able to maybe work really hard so that they don't have to work on Fridays and they can go ski.
Remote work is also well supported by local infrastructure, says Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce President JJ Ahmed.
We have the second largest domestic route network of any airport in America,
making it convenient to meet a client or attend a corporate meeting in person when Zoom just doesn't cut it. I'm Elizabeth Schroebel for Marketplace.
Hey, so look, we get it. Sometimes you miss stuff on the air. It happens. Life is busy. But when it happens to you, you get what you need on our podcast. Check it out. Platform of your choice, of course. In 2013, there were 13.5 million marriages in China. Last year, so barely a decade later, there were 6.8 million marriages in China. That's the smallest number since Beijing started keeping track back in 1986. There has, of course, been a lot going on over there the past couple of years. Zero COVID and the associated high-profile lockdowns in some of the big cities, really high unemployment rates for young people, and just general economic unease, all of which can make people of marriageable age think twice. So, are the people in China still getting married? Marketplace's Jennifer Pack took a trip out to Wuhan in central China to find out.
Wuhan's emerald-colored East Lake used to be one of Chinese leader Mao Zedong's favorite vacation spots. Today, though, it's a popular wedding location, and a tough negotiation is in progress. The young couple, Wang Ai and Ans Chen, both 29, are meeting wedding planners. The planners are playing a slideshow of their past work, including a Harry Potter-themed wedding. The fee for decorations alone, around $4,800. My eyebrows shoot up. That's equivalent to about 4 months of an average salary in Wuhan. The price I'm quoting you really isn't that high, says one of the wedding planners. And you know, every year the cost will increase. You sure about that? Says the groom-to-be Ans Chen. The price of houses is dropping. So why are you putting up your prices? Especially since not that many people are getting married nowadays. Over a coffee, the couple tells me the reason they're getting married is that they found the one. They attended the same high school, live a 5-minute drive apart, but only met during the pandemic. Their fairy tale began on a dating app. I was swiping through pictures until I landed on his photo. This man seems alright, she says. So we chatted online. Once we met, we decided to date exclusively. Romance aside, young couples have to think of the practicalities, and men seeking a bride usually need to bring a property to the table. Ans Chen secured his condo with the help of his parents.
My family bought the property after we started dating. The condo is close to our parents too, and so our parents can help us with childcare when we have kids, and we can look after our parents if they get sick.
That is the social norm. Back when China's economy was planned and the state took care of city folks from cradle to grave, nobody needed to worry about things like childcare or retirement. Nowadays, all that is down to the family. But some things haven't changed, like traditional beliefs about ensuring the survival of your family name and influence. Sociology professor Miao Jia is with NYU's Shanghai campus.
Our recent research showed that the majority of Chinese people still believe that individuals have obligation to make the whole family glory, and they have obligation to continue the family bloodline.
That obligation makes bride-to-be Wang Ai anxious. The wedding ceremony is not done yet, and already both sets of parents are pressuring them to have kids. I'm almost 30, she says, and I don't want to leave it too late. I thought about getting pregnant next year, but then my job in finance is also important. Maybe I should put off having a baby for a couple of years. Because in Wuhan, once a woman takes maternity leave, it's really tough to return to work at the same job level. Back in the negotiations with the wedding planners, there's a final offer on the table, about $2,300. Look, it's a good price, one of the planners says. Sure, you could shop around for a cheaper quote. But you know what matters more than the money, she says? Time. Let us handle the wedding plans, and with the time you save, you could earn double what you pay us. We walk out into a beautiful adjoining garden where a wedding is in progress. Okay, says bride-to-be Wang Ai. I'll think about it, and I'll get back to you. But she tells me she's still gonna shop around. In Wuhan City, I'm Jennifer Papp for Marketplace.
This final note on the way out today, NVIDIA, the big artificial intelligence computer chip design company, had a rough day. This morning, the Biden administration let it be known that it's cracking down more on AI chip sales to China, tightening loopholes and early restrictions, is what Conference Market said. NVIDIA shares down 5% today. The company doesn't seem all that phased. Here's the quote: "Given the worldwide demand for our products, we don't expect a near-term meaningful impact on our financial results."
Marketplace is supported by JLL, leveraging global data locally. experience and technology in its quest to solve complex commercial real estate challenges. JLL.com. See a brighter way. And by Million Bazillion, a podcast about money for kids and their families. We help dollars make more sense.
All right, here's your moment of economic context as we depart. There are 31 days until government funding runs out. The Constitution says, by the way, those funding bills got to start in the House of Representatives. No reason. Our digital and on-demand team includes Carrie Barber, Dylan Manton, Janet Wynn, Olga Oxman, Ellen Rolfes, Virginia K. Smith, and Tony Wagner. Francesca Levy is the Executive Director of Digital and On Demand, and I'm Kyle Risdall. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is APM.
Support comes from the University of Cincinnati and the Lindner College of Business, offering their online Masters of Finance degree, 100% online from the same nationally recognized faculty as the on-campus programs. Financial aid available, and the program comes with a dedicated student support specialist and academic advisor. More at online.
Support comes from Zakira's Garage, specializing in repair.
Hey, it's Daniel Alarcon from NPR's Radio Mulate podcast. I'm one of thousands of NPR network voices coming to you from over 200 local newsrooms across the country. We bring all Americans closer together through free and independent journalism, music, politics, culture, and so much more. The NPR network. What you hear changes everything.
People who survived the surprise attacks by Hamas in Israel can still recount vivid images of the carnage of October 7th.
It was like an apocalypse, like everything ruined, like with bodies lay around.
Dan Alam told NPR that militants killed more than 100 people in his community, a small kibbutz in the south of Israel. He lost neighbors, friends. The pain is overwhelming.
I'm just grieving for my friends, my parents' friends, my community. So we just don't know how to deal with it, but we just know we just been slaughtered and nobody came to help us.
Another survivor, Noy Katzum, lost their brother in the attack.
It's tough days. We're sitting here, Shiva, it's 7 days after the funeral in Judaism, where you sit and everyone comes and shares our condolences.
But for those whose loved ones haven't been identified, that mourning process may be on hold. Consider this. Forensic experts are still trying to identify hundreds of people killed in Israel in the Hamas attacks. Coming up, my visit to an army base in Israel where soldiers, medical examiners, and rabbis are working around the clock to identify people's remains. From NPR, I'm Ari Shapiro. It's Tuesday, October 17th.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Capital One, the Capital One Quicksilver Card. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details. This message comes from NPR sponsor AWS. What if you could power new possibilities, predict customer wants, and speed up prototyping? With AWS, you can. From generative AI and machine learning to data analytics, AWS drives business transformation. Imagine what the cloud can do for you.
You ever been there when an uncomfortable question about race comes up, but you don't know how to answer? That's where Code Switch lives. Each week, we're talking about race and how it intersects with every other aspect of your life, especially when it's uncomfortable. Listen now to the Code Switch podcast from NPR.
It's Consider This from NPR. We're on an army base south of Tel Aviv, and the sun is sinking behind low clouds as the smell of eucalyptus fills the air. A man in uniform wearing a kippah is leading us to see this place of the remains of people who were killed in the massacre have been brought for identification.
I ask you to respect this place. I ask you to respect the dead.
Like many members of the Israel Defense Forces, Lihi is only authorized to give us her first name. She wanted journalists from all over the world to see something that medical examiners, doctors, and rabbis have been bearing witness to over the last week. And a warning, the descriptions her colleagues gave are graphic and not suitable for some listeners.
ואנחנו כאומה לא יכולים לשתוק על דבר שכזה.
We as a people can't remain silent for something like this.
Colonel Chaim Weisberg is head rabbi of the IDF. A military spokesman named David translates for him. Rabbi Weisberg has spent nearly 20 years in his position. He says usually when a Jew dies, a family member says a prayer called the mourner's Kaddish for the dead.
הילד אומר על אבא שלו כי ככה בדרך הטבע. אבל פה יש לנו עשרות משפחות, מאות משפחות בלי הגזמה שאין מי שיגיד עליהם קדיש.
The regular way would be for a child to say Kaddish, this prayer for his parents. But here we have entire families that no one's going to be able to say Kaddish for them.
More than 1,000 bodies have been brought here, truck after truck, full of human remains. People who were murdered when Hamas stormed across the border from Gaza into Israel on October 7th. Rabbi Weisberg breaks down as he describes in detail the conditions some of the bodies arrived in, burned and mutilated.
נשים, צעירות, נשים מבוגרות. סבתות לילדים נאנסות. אפשר להגיד.
Young girls, elderly women, raped.
חיילים ואזרחים שראשיהם נערף, והכל מצולם ומתועד לכל צחוקם של המחבלים.
Soldiers and citizens whose heads were chopped off.
Many of the people identifying and caring for the dead are military reservists. They have day jobs as civilians. But since the attack, they've been here, like a dentist named Mayan. She identifies people's remains by their dental imprints.
Next to the identification place when we take place, there is family room to say goodbye to the loved ones, to say their last goodbye. So while identifying, we can hear the screams and we can hear the cries of a woman bearing her child, losing his parents and staying orphan. And we hear the cry and we hear the screams and we're still identifying tirelessly, uncompromisingly, to give this fallen the last respect that nobody gave them.
We walk towards the brightly lit white tent where soldiers have been doing this work. It is difficult work and the details, as you'll hear, are brutal. One of the soldiers is handing out a packet of masks because the smell is very strong. People have been working in a 24/7 shift since the massacre began. Even now, more than a week later, there are still bodies that haven't been identified. The rabbi said they have 3 ways of identifying bodies. One is a loved one, visually recognizing the person. Another is dental records. And the third is DNA identification. And he said, in too many of these cases, we've had to use DNA because the body has been so mutilated, he said, even in the case of children. There are about a dozen shipping containers, refrigerated, side by side, and then in white coveralls have just opened 4 of the shipping containers, and inside, stacked 4 high, are body bags. And some of the body bags are very, very small. And the rabbi says, usually when we're here we don't speak. When you open the doors, you see that small sack, that's a baby. A light rain is starting to fall. The TV cameraman suddenly hunches over, sobbing. We walk in the misty drizzle to a small covered picnic table, the smoker's corner. And there, we sit in the dark with a woman named Avigail. Like others, the IDF only authorized her to give her first name.
It's hard to remember these days, but I work in high-tech.
In Judaism, as in many religious traditions, there are rules for how a body is supposed to be treated before burial. For many years, Avigail has done that preparation for burial as a reservist for the Army.
There's a concept of respect for the dead. It's treating every dead person with the dignity and respect that we'd want, the same as we'd want when we're living. We're also very conscious of is the woman exposed on the table, and to try to cover up when possible any part that was part of the human being. We bring it to burial with the body. So if there are ashes, we're very careful not to lose any of the ashes. If there's skin that was torn away, certainly if there's blood, if there's flesh, we collect everything so that it's all buried with the body.
When I asked what the last week has felt like to her, more than 1,000 bodies to be identified and prepared for burial, from babies to elders, she says, for most of the last week she has felt very little. Blocking out feelings was the only way to do the work that needed to be done.
Despite the fact that I was only sleeping about 2 hours per 24-hour cycle, and I was hardly eating, I felt like I had the energy. I don't know if it's adrenaline or the mission, the importance of the mission, and just keep going, do the work, understand that it's horrific what we're seeing, but do our best to get the correct identification for each of the murdered women and prepare them for burial in the most respectful manner once they've been identified. I think in the last day we've been slowing down just a little. We're making a lot of progress, and So I think it's catching up with me a little.
You're starting to feel the feelings.
The exhaustion, but it's not really the physical. It's maybe part of it is the physical exhaustion. It's the mental exhaustion. We're talking about it a little more. We have some psychiatrists and social workers that are talking to us after shifts, but I think it's like starting to build up. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I don't remember what it was.
How you're feeling, and it sounds like for a while you weren't feeling much, and now you're really feeling a lot.
Yes.
As somebody who has done this work in the Army for a long time, you've seen people killed in violent ways. How has this been different from the deaths from violence that you have already dealt with over many years?
I think it's different in two ways. The numbers are like mind-boggling. I still, I'm at it, and I can't wrap my head around it. I go through the lists again, and I'm like, wow, and I can't believe that I can't remember from 2 days ago what exactly. Was she the one that was in her cute pajamas, or was she the one that was, I don't know what. The numbers are incredible, and it's not just knowing the numbers, it's seeing the amount, and the smell intensifies. It's something that I've never, seeing horrible deaths, I've never had to deal with the smell at this intensity. And the other is, it's never felt this cruel. I mean, we're seeing bodies that were mutilated after they were already dead. Why is, it's harder to, I feel, wrap my head around it.
This experience has obviously changed you. Has it changed your view of humanity? Has it changed your view of people?
I think it shattered something in my sense of security. It's certainly, something in the sense of the equilibrium of the world, of the balance of good and evil. I kept, for years growing up, I thought that the world is improving. As a human being, as a woman, I felt like things were progressing in the right direction. I can't think that anymore, and that's shattering.
Over our heads, Israeli military jets rumble through the sky, and as we drive away from the army base, a siren blares through the air. Every car on the freeway pulls over the shoulder. People huddle on the blacktop from the threat of incoming rockets. Reminders that while people are still identifying the bodies from October 7th, the war and its death toll only continue to grow. Tuesday night, that death toll grew dramatically in Gaza. An explosion hit a hospital. Hundreds of people were killed. Egypt condemned what it called, quote, a deliberate bombing of civilian facilities. The Palestinian ambassador to the UK called it a massacre and war crimes, posting an image of the building on fire. And the Palestinian Authority declared 3 days of mourning. The Israeli military blamed Islamic Jihad, saying the hospital explosion was a failed rocket launch. It's Consider This from NPR. I'm Ari Shapiro.
Hey, it's Brittany Luce from NPR's It's Been a Minute podcast. I'm one of thousands of NPR network voices, coming to you from over 200 local newsrooms across the country. We bring all Americans closer together through free and independent journalism, music, politics, culture, and so much more. The NPR network. What you hear changes everything. Learn more at npr.org/network. NPR.
So this one time, back in 2011, Philip Glover had a problem with the plumbing in his house. So he called a company called Roto-Rooter.
They came and worked on the plumbing a little bit, and it kept backing up, and it never got fixed. And I had to go to another company, but they wanted to keep billing me. And so they kept billing me.
Whelan, what would you do in this situation?
Give up? I know, these things are so hard. That's how they get you, they just wear you down.
Yes, who cannot relate to this? Like, do you really want to fight the company or just pay up? But that is not what Philip did. As he told our colleagues at the NPR News show All Things Considered, Philip decided to reach out to what was a new government agency at the time, something called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB.
I ended up getting hold of CFPB, and they sent them a letter, and the next time I got a letter from Roto-Rooter, it was that they would not be billing me any further.
Later on, when Phil had a billing dispute with Verizon,
he reached out to the CFPB again, and next thing you know, Verizon backed off.
That agency has leverage, and they have lawyers, and I think that's what a regular person out here needs.
Now, the CFPB started about 12 years ago to help people like Phil. And this is one of those situations where the name says it all. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau exists to provide consumers with protection against financial shenanigans. Things like predatory lending, deceptive contracts, bogus fees. But recently, the Bureau found itself in front of the Supreme Court trying to defend itself against companies who argue that the Bureau itself is bogus. This is the Indicator for Planet Money. I'm Adrian Ma.
And I'm Waylon Wong. After the break, the CFPB, its origins, why it grew so powerful, and why its critics want to see it taken down.
In the late 2000s, a Harvard law professor named Elizabeth Warren made this pitch to Congress and the American public for a new kind of financial regulator.
Right now, we have an agency that we desperately need, both to stabilize American families and, frankly, for the stability of the American economy. I think it has both.
This was way before she was known as Senator Warren or presidential candidate Warren. The country was still reeling from the Great Recession, caused by a meltdown in the mortgage market.
And of course, there were already existing financial regulators, right? Like the Securities and Exchange Commission, which oversees Wall Street investing.
Or the Federal Trade Commission, which polices monopolies and big business practices.
But for the individual consumer, right? When the plumbing company won't stop billing you, or the bank hits you with 2 overdraft fees in a day, or when the mortgage lender is pushing a predatory loan, who are you going to call?
In the late 2000s, maybe Yelp?
Good luck with that.
At the time, we had something like 1 in 10 mortgages blowing up and causing, destructive damage for both the lender and certainly for the borrower.
Stacey Cowley has covered the agency for the New York Times, and she says in arguing for its creation, Elizabeth Warren often drew a comparison to consumer goods.
And the metaphor she liked to use was that if 1 in 10 toasters was blowing up and causing harm, we would have regulated that thing out of existence. Like, why is this that, when it's a typical tangible product, we have pretty intense consumer safety regulations, and when it's a financial product, we don't.
So the CFPB was created to focus on regulating business practices that affect these individual consumers. But in order to do that effectively, Elizabeth Warren argued that it had to be independent. It had to avoid the problem regulatory agencies often face, which is they become these political footballs. Like a new president gets elected and then they start firing people, or a new Congress comes in and they start slashing the agency's budget.
So 2 things were done at the outset that made this agency kind of a little bit unique and pretty powerful. The first was that it was a single director-run agency.
One head honcho who was appointed for a 5-year term. That's different from most federal regulators, which are run by a panel of appointees, often from both political parties.
Right, it's like fewer chefs in the kitchen, right?
That's right, just got one big cheese.
And now the second way the CFPB is also different from most agencies is the way it is funded.
Instead of having to go to Congress every year and get Congress to appropriate the money to run this agency, instead we're going to have Congress set a cap, but that the agency will get its money by simply going to the Federal Reserve and telling it how much it needs, and the Federal Reserve will write a check. And that was explicitly designed to keep the agency from being something that Congress could starve when it wanted to.
And so from the start, the CFPB structure made it more independent than the usual agency. And for most of the 12 years it's been around, it has been pretty aggressive in carrying out its mission.
By the way, 12 years is still pretty young in federal agency terms, right? So it's like an aggressive baby.
It is an agency that can make rules. So when it sees a gap in the market and says, we need new rules to police this thing, it has the power to do that. It's also a law enforcement agency. It's charged with enforcing the rules it creates in the existing consumer protection rules. And it also is a supervisory agency. So it also does things like it has bank examiners.
Huh. Okay. This is not the greatest analogy because it sounds a bit dramatic, but when you start to say, like, well, it can make rules, it can also enforce the rules, I was thinking about that movie Judge Dredd, where the tagline is, like, judge, jury, and executioner. Like,
well, that is a good analogy because that's exactly, a lot of the industry criticism of the CFPB is exactly that. This idea that this one agency led by this one individual can act as judge, jury, and executioner in a fairly large and powerful market.
This power would later become a liability for the agency, but it also meant this new watchdog had some real teeth. Mortgage market run amok?
Bam! New regulations on mortgage lending.
Wells Fargo printing sham accounts for its customers?
Shabow! Multi-million-dollar fines.
Banks collecting billions in overdraft fees?
How about a multi-year pressure campaign resulting in the banks dropping overdraft fees altogether?
I'll take it. And on top of that, the agency says its enforcement actions have resulted in about $19 billion in debt relief and compensation for consumers.
When you file a complaint, the company that you file it on typically has to respond. And the agency tracks, do they respond? Did they address your problem? Was there money involved in addressing your problem? Then look, sometimes it gets results and sometimes it doesn't, but filing a complaint with the CFPB does force a company to respond. And I've certainly spoken to people who've gotten, refund checks and things like that because they did that.
But the qualities that made the CFPB such a powerful regulator also made it hated by Republicans. For instance, during the Trump administration, Congress and President Trump rolled back a CFPB rule aimed at the payday lending industry. And they also rolled back a rule aimed at banning forced arbitration clauses. These things in contracts that don't allow people to bring class action lawsuits against companies.
And the president also appointed folks to the agency who were critics of the CFPB. People like Mick Mulvaney.
My opinion of the structure of the CFPB has not changed. I still think it's an awful example of a bureaucracy that has gone wrong when it is almost entirely unaccountable to the people that are supposed to oversee it or supposed to pay for it.
And not surprisingly, a lot of businesses who've been subject to the CFPB's oversight agree. Various industry groups have sued the agency over the years, and in 2020, one of those lawsuits wound up in the Supreme Court. In that case, the court held that actually the president can fire the head of the CFPB whenever they want.
Yeah, and earlier this month, a group of payday lenders argued in the Supreme Court that, the CFPB's funding system, how they get money from the Fed instead of Congress, they argued that this is unconstitutional, and therefore the CFPB doesn't have the authority to make the rules it's been making. So in short, the very things that made the Bureau an unusually strong independent regulator also made it a target for critics.
Now, this latest case won't be decided for several months, but Stacey says it's not clear the Supreme Court buys the plaintiff's arguments, which would call into question everything the CFPB has been doing for the past 12 years.
I think it's fair to say they will continue being controversial for as long as they exist, in that it is a powerful agency. And I think, too, that you've seen the things that haven't worked. The fact that the payday law got gutted, the fact that the arbitration rule went away, is an indication of, political checks and balances are real.
In other words, this watchdog might still have teeth, but it also matters who's holding the leash. This episode is produced by Corey Bridges, with engineering by Sina Lafredo. Sierra Juarez checked the facts, and Alex Goldmark edited this episode. Kate Cannon is our editor, and The Indicator is a production of NPR.
On Saturday, October 7th, as Hamas militants stormed into Israel, Rachel Goldberg heard emergency sirens. She turned on her phone to see if her son, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, had been in touch. She found 2 text messages from him. One said, "I love you guys." The other said, "I'm sorry." Her son was at the Nova Music Festival, one of the sites attacked by Hamas militants where they killed more than 250 people. Rachel late